Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of West Point, the Army, or any organization. Let's go to the podcast. Kevin Belmont, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Paul. Well, glad to be here.
You know, we're talking about going way back. We were in Beast together. We were in C4 as plebes together. Man, I think the only person I've known longer than you is my brother.
Well, it's too bad we lost touch over the years, but yeah, we go back to the very, very, very beginning.
Now,
Yeah.
I have to lead with this. Young man from Magnolia, Arkansas. You had your Razorback hat during Beast. Like, I remember you wearing that. I was just amazed. Or was it when we were plebes?
We were plebes. I got it when we were plebes. I had the little plastic Razorback helmet that everybody wore back in the day.
Right.
So, yeah.
And in fact, in your howitzer entry, the Razorback helmet is mentioned.
Yes, it is. I kept it proudly displayed all 4 years on my bookshelf. I made room for it, so it was there.
Now, Magnolia is out in the southwestern part of the state. I had a chance to look it up. It's the home to the largest barbecue in the world. They've got a couple of distinctions there in Magnolia.
Yeah, now they do. Back in the early 80s, they were not known for as much.
You were the distinction, right?
Not really. No.
And where do we find you today? Where are you sitting today in the world?
Right now, I'm in White Plains, New York, which is about, 35 minutes north of New York City on the other side of the Hudson from West Point. So just south of West Point. And
what brought you there? Career? Family?
A little bit of both. Whenever I got out of the Army, we kind of slowly migrated from Maryland, which was my last duty station, to Pennsylvania, to New Jersey, where my ex is, and where she has family. And then wanted to stay close to my daughter, who still lives in New Jersey, and my son, who's still there with his mom, and work, of course, I work in New York City, so I'm in the city now at least 2-3 days a week. So it's, work and family.
You work in New York City. That's amazing. So you're a man of technology now. So you have been for a while, right?
Yeah. Since, when we were cadets, I majored in computer science. And then when I got out of the Army, my first job was a network engineer for some crazy small company, and then I kind of lucked into the world of Oracle Financials and the technical side of that, as far as development work, and I've been pigeonholed and loving it in the Oracle Financials technical development little specific world that I live in, and I've made a career of it, and I've got about 3 more years.
3 more years.
We'll definitely last 3 more years till I turn 65, and then I'll start my next career.
On to your next career. Well, let's go all the way back to Magnolia, Arkansas. Yes. Young Kevin Belmont, 17, 18 years old. What was it about the academy that it turned your head?
Well, growing up, I would hear stories from my dad about his time in the Navy. My dad was a real cut up growing up. He for his high school graduation, my grandfather, the story goes, took him down to the recruiting station and says, "You can pick Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Go ahead." So
at least there was a choice.
That was it. That was the gift. You get to choose. So he chose the Navy because he said at the time he wanted to have a bed to sleep in every night. Okay. So he was in during Korea, and I think he did some time in the Seabees, and then he actually got an appointment to the Naval Academy Prep School, and it was in Bainbridge, Maryland at the time.
Right.
And he, for some reason, he couldn't pass the physical to get into the Naval Academy, so he got out and turned his life around and became a doctor of letters. has his PhD, and he taught English, literature, and philosophy at a small university in southern Arkansas.
There
So
you
that's
go.
where I grew up.
And how did that affect you growing up? Did you have a lot of books around the house and you were a reader, or were you more of a sportsman? What was your
Oh God, no. I was not a reader. English was my worst subject, maybe because I was rebelling.
Right.
But I have four sisters and one brother, and all of
Okay.
my older sisters who were close to my age, they were avid readers.
Okay.
I read just to get by.
Yeah.
So, you know, I did very well in math, but, growing up in Magnolia, Arkansas, small little town, just 200 people in my high school graduating class. It was not, it didn't prepare me for West Point. I'll put
Sure.
it that
What kind
way.
of sports did you play? You played something, right?
Oh, yeah. Growing up as a young kid, it was baseball, and I played football until ninth grade when I hit my growth spurt very late in life. So when I
Right.
was younger, I was really small, like the second smallest kid in my class.
Okay.
And so I played baseball because I could at least field good. And then swimming. Swimming was the sport where my father's brothers and sisters, they excelled. And so he pushed us into that. And I really excelled and did very well.
Okay. Well,
So,
it's, well, being a development on that developmental curve, it allowed you to sharpen your wit. So the apple didn't fall far from the tree when it came to being a
I
bit of
try.
a character.
I try.
What? So he was in the Navy, so that kind of got you oriented. How, in terms of college choices, were you all in at West Point, or did you have a
Oh
multiple you
God, no. When I was in high school, I had no clue about West Point. It was a classmate of mine, Bobby Polk, who was a class of '85.
Yeah.
He applied out of high school to West Point, and I was like, he's never going to get in. And I applied for an ROTC scholarship out of high school, both Army and Navy, and I was
Yeah.
like, I'll get one of those easy. And if I get the Navy one, I'm going to go to Ole Miss. And if I get the Army scholarship, I'll just stay here locally for a year, at the college my dad taught, a year or two, because I wanted to swim competitively in college for the coach, the college coach there.
Uh-huh.
And because when I was in high school, he would let me come in and work out with the college team when I was just in high school, so I could, get extra laps in. So
And what was your event as a swimmer?
my best event was the 200 freestyle.
Freestyle.
So
Good
I
for you.
wasn't totally sprint,
Yeah.
100 or 50, but I had a little bit of stamina. So the 200
had
was
to
my,
hang in there for the whole 200.
yeah.
Well, that's certainly something that helped a little bit at the academy. But
Oh, yeah. Well,
so you
yeah.
applied to the ROTC, but how did that end up that you got into the academy?
Well, I wasn't even a first choice. The Naval ROTC scholarship, I didn't even get offered one. The
Yeah.
Army ROTC scholarship, I was actually an alternate. And so it was very late, I guess April or May, my senior year, when I actually found out that I got the ROTC scholarship.
Wow.
So I stayed locally. I swam for the local college there. I did everything you were supposed to do when you go to college. I pledged a fraternity. I was on the swim team. I went to class. But while I was going through the ROTC program, one of the colonels said, Kevin, I think you should apply for West Point. Every year
Oh.
they have a few scholarships available to ROTC cadets to go to West Point. And I said,
Okay.
well, my buddy from high school, Bobby Polk, he got in right away out of high school. I said, okay, I'll give it a shot because I'm going to be in the Army anyway. I've got a 4-year ROTC scholarship. I'm
Yeah.
going. So they helped me do all the paperwork. And
You must
I
have
did
been pretty good at shining shoes and kind of showing up on time, things like that, obviously, for the colonel to reach out to you like that.
Well, I used to hang out with all the ROTC kids. And I don't mean the kids in college. I mean the students, the family members of the ROTC instructors, because they were my age. So I was in high school, I was going orienteering. I was doing rappelling with them on the
Yeah.
weekends because, they would take their kids along with the college students. And so I had experience doing all that stuff. So yeah, the RTC instructors, they said, we'll help you do all the paperwork. I went to my interview. I don't remember what congressman or senator,
Yeah, right.
look, hey, look, I'm going to be in the Army anyway, whether I go to West Point or not. I've got my scholarship, but it would be a much better education for me if I went there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess that candor just lent itself to, okay, you can go.
So you
I got it.
completed a year of college before you went to the academy. How
Yeah,
did that help you at all in terms of balancing you out, or making you feel like you
yeah.
experienced a little bit of college? Or
I loved, being in college. I lived in the dorm. I didn't live at home. I did all the college things you're supposed to do.
yeah, yeah,
So I knew what I was giving up when I went to West Point, but I
okay.
don't think I could have made it academically without that year in
Right,
college because, again, small town schools in Arkansas back in the day, I wasn't prepped for the amount of study and the type
right.
of studying you have to do. So,
So it gave you a little leg up. That's good for you.
yeah,
That's
so I
great.
had that experience.
Did you prep at all for going back, or did you visit, or was it just kind of you hit
Oh,
it
no, no, no,
cold?
no.
And
It was okay. Mom and Dad drove me down to Dallas to catch the airplane
off you
up to
go.
West Point, and I stayed in one of those hotels and took the bus up the first day. And
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just like in La
That
La
must be why
Land.
you and I in that B squad were turning the wrong directions and marching in circles, because you and I both hit it cold.
Oh, well, at least I knew how to march and salute. So those
Right.
first stations, and stand at
You
attention,
got that
I
grounding.
maxed out. I maxed that. But
Okay.
it was all the other stuff like the cadet in the red sash. New cadet, toe my line. So what did I do? I put my toes on that line. And I put my bags down so that I could be ready to salute. New cadet, who told you to put those bags
There
down?
you go.
Pick them
See.
up. Who told you to pick them up? And that whole classic routine of,
Right. But
you know,
sir, I've been in the Reserve
and
Officer Training Corps.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, just get to the back of the line, new cadet, and think about it. And so I go back to the back of the line, come up again the next time, and I did it right. So,
We had our squad leader's Constance Chu. I ran across her. She was our second detail squad leader, and
yes.
I ran across her profile on LinkedIn and reached out to her, and she was incredibly gracious, remembered all of us, and it was a great little kind of online interaction. Just so,
Yeah.
yeah. And then after Beast, other Beast stories. I guess we were there. You and I had the benefit of having Tim Knight in our squad.
Yes. Do you remember the time that Tim Knight came out to formation in his BDUs with a dress off?
That's how squared away. That was the
Well,
first captain in the making, right there.
because the upperclassmen, they didn't have the new BDUs. They were still in the whatever
He was
the
just getting
greens
ahead of it.
were, and they had their shirts tucked in and dress offs. I guess he figured he needed to have one too. And so when I come out for formation, it's like Tim's got his shirt tucked in. I said, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's. And I'm just not saying anything. And yeah, he got flamed for that one, I think.
Yeah, it was a learning experience for Tim, and he went right from that to being the first captain. So that was a
Okay.
direct thing. He was it was tremendous because he would be so good at learning poop and the rest that he would get the upperclassmen in a good mood. But of course, then they'd slide over to you and I and really get a get a chance
Lord.
to
Oh yeah.
Oh, good
Which
stuff.
reminds me of the minute calling, that first reorgy week or whatever it was.
Yeah, talk about that. So we went to C4, which was a tough company. We were
Right.
in the same company together. Talk about your minute calling
Uh,
extravaganza there.
I've gotten so much mileage out of this story because it was funny at the time and it's still funny today, or at least to me. I find it humorous. I come out and I'm calling minutes, and the 10 minutes till whatever formation, and the dessert for this meal is cherry pie. And you notice the pronunciation is cherry pie.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as I start walking back to my room, I don't get 2 steps. Belmont, what did you say about? And they were like
I
coming
actually
out of the
remember
woodwork.
this.
And they were coming out of the woodwork at me. And I was like, I had no idea what I had just done. I thought I had it nailed. And of course, then I realized once they start, and I'm listening to who's saying what,
Right.
it's my pronunciation of
The
pot.
accent.
So,
Didn't
and of course,
they wanted you to emphasize that accent after a while? I remember this whole thing.
yeah.
You were out there calling minutes, and they'd all kind of gather around to make you.
Oh, yeah. I guess it was a source of entertainment.
It was
for
a
them.
source of great entertainment.
That and the fact that being from Arkansas, I had extra poop that I had to memorize.
J.R. Schwartz just did the Arkansas poop on a call we had together. So how did you learn the Arkansas poop? Was that written down somewhere?
It was handwritten on a note by this guy from Hope, Arkansas, which is just up the road from Magnolia. He was a yearling, and he found me, and he goes, "You're from Magnolia?" "Yes, sir." He said, "Memorize this. I'll be back in a week." Okay. And once I started reading it, I was just laughing my ass off.
It is very funny.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's kind of irreverent. It's making fun of people, right? Isn't that the...
Well, and it's not politically correct in any way, shape, or form.
It doesn't play well these days, right?
No. And I wonder if it's lost in Academy folklore now that, no one, I'm sure they don't make them memorize it, but I can still to this day, like JR,
yeah, JR
reeled
off a little bit of it, and it's filled with spicy words.
A lot of those, yeah. So
well, now why would the Arkansas gang kind of force you with extra poop? You'd think there'd be like a little state collegiality where they want to take it off your hands. Instead, they added to it.
No, but it was funny. And so it entertained the upperclassmen, and they always enjoyed hearing it. And, if you could embellish it a little bit and put in some pauses.
Because people who weren't from Arkansas wouldn't know it, so you could really get it going, right?
And yeah. And
I remember you doing that. I remember you actually doing that, then making you do that formation. Of course, you put a little zing on it.
I tried to be, a little theatrical there.
Occasionally. Brilliant. And then what got you through plebe year? Who'd you room with plebe year, and what got you through it?
First semester it was Andy Ornatowski.
Yeah.
I think he went down to C2, and a guy named Tom or Tim Johnson. He left after the first semester. I had a roommate leave in Beast. And then I think first semester of my yearling year, I had a roommate leave. So I'm like, after 3 guys left, I said, okay, I'm safe because, everybody around me kept leaving. I'm good now.
Like, looked either way. You accounted for the ones that were going to leave anyway. So,
but what got me through plebe year, I don't know. It was, I tried to stay as much as possible under the radar, let other people, and just because, firing it up C4, it was just.
I looked at a list of our company mates from C4 just out of curiosity, and it was kind of a surprise who was in the company. We were so afraid to go in the hallways, we didn't actually go socialize much. So I hung with my roommates, but you just didn't want to be out in the hallways because all times, day and night, they would find a reason to offer corrections and chances for improvement.
Exactly. But you knew exactly if you saw somebody coming, you knew you could just kind of slip into a roommate's classroom or a roommate's dorm room and just kind of hang out and let them pass and then, go. But
it was amazing the amount of times I was in the restroom when I didn't really need to be there. For that exact reason. You just pop in there.
And then freshman year, I think it was, over the summer they had you try out for Core Squad sports during Beast. And I said, okay, I swam at college. I'll try to make the swim team here at West Point. And so, you go in and you're working out. I'm swimming next to, Scott Schussmeister,
Joe Martin, John Lazar.
And any and everybody who was really, really good at swimming. Right. Now, I thought I was good, but I was not D1 level good. I did, after Beast Barracks, I went in to the locker room, and I had my name on the locker, and I made the team. But I told Coach Riley at the time, I was like, look, I got to study. I don't think I can make it. I've got a year of eligibility I have to give up because I swam, college already once. And the fact that during Reorgi week, they made us sign up for intramurals. Yep. And I didn't know that, because I was on a core squad, I didn't have to play intramurals. I didn't know. No one told me. So I signed up for soccer. And the very first soccer practice, I broke my ankle. So, I cobbled into the swim team coach on crutches. I'm not going to swim. And then I got to spend a lot of extra time with a lot of firsties riding up and down the elevator to the 5th floor.
Getting to know them.
Yes. And trying to stay out in the background. And, back in the day when we went to class, we didn't have backpacks or rucksacks for books. You put your books in a laundry bag and carry it on your crutches, which made it even, because, you're
even
going
more
this
of a target because the rest of us are carrying our books. When I think about the craziness of humping those books around on the star days they were called, where you had extra books, you had like an extra period. And so your arm was like straight out, just holding books. It was just
and Saturday classes and all that.
Saturday classes. Those are the days. What an inconvenient thing to have a broken foot plebe year.
Oh, yeah. But I got out of a lot of drill that fall. Didn't have to do parades in the fall. I made up for it the rest of the 4 years I was there. But, that was, I guess, one of the godsends. I could do a little extra studying.
Yeah. Well, let's follow a thread, but we'll make sure we go through your new company as a yearling and everything. But so you took that swimming and you ended up with the triathlon team.
Yeah. Back in the day, triathlons aren't like the triathlons you have now. It wasn't swimming, running, and biking. Back then, it was a mini pentathlon. So they cut out the fencing and the equestrian. So you had running, swimming, and shooting. So I could shoot.
Really?
I knew how to shoot. I could swim, but running was my nemesis. But I figured the goal was, when I was a plebe, I saw these people walking around with their jackets, the gray jackets that we wore, and you could get a patch on them. And to get a patch, you had to be a core squad athlete or a club champ. You had to do something special. And so I started looking down the list. What can I do to get a patch? Well, there's the triathlon team. I can swim, I can shoot, and I bet you I could run fast enough to make the cutoff time just once. To run fast enough.
Just fast enough.
I actually did it. I qualified to get the patch on my jacket, which was, my pride and joy at the time, to not have it, just that plain jacket with nothing on it, So
yeah, that was my fate. I was just down at a Founders Day, and all the classmates coming in with their gray jackets because they had patches on it. I threw my gray jacket out. There was no honor in it. I could have faked it up. I couldn't even fake it up. I was on a recreational team, so you were smart. You played it smart there, but you leveraged that swimming. Now it's too bad they gave up equestrian, because then you'd be a man of the horses. You'd be like
like General Patton. He was an equestrian pentathlete. So,
and now after C4, you went over to 2nd Regiment.
Yeah, I got transferred to F2, and I was the only one from C4. No, I take that back. There were 2 of us that came from C4 to F2, and it was myself and yearling Cookie Rojas. I don't know if you remember Darlene Rojas.
I do remember. Yeah.
For some reason, she left C4 after her yearling year and transferred into.
They sent you over there. Okay.
Yeah, to F2. So I was in the zoo for my last 3 years.
By the way, I have to say, for the whole group, for the kids at home, Gold Star, you sent great notes, and your grasp of the detail is fantastic. People think that I remember all this stuff, but it's really just from lots of conversations that you start picking all this up. You came right out of the gate. I mean, remember Cookie Rojas? That's big.
Yeah. Well, there were only 2 of us from C4 that went over there, so it was pretty easy. I didn't have any plebe friends anymore, so I had to make all new friends.
We had a great group in C4. I was really sad when we rotated.
So
okay,
but, I had classes.
Was F2 a relaxed company? Was it an intense company? What did you find after those rigors of C4?
Much more relaxed than C4. So and but it was a very tight-knit group, and I'm still in touch with a lot of those guys today. In fact,
That's great.
tomorrow I'm heading up to West Point, going to meet up with Jim Radecki from the zoo, Daryl McDonald, Pete Curing.
Yeah,
We're going
right.
to go to the lacrosse game against North Carolina tomorrow.
PJ
So,
Gross will be up there. He goes to every lacrosse game, so if you see him, say hi.
I
From
will.
down here, his son's on
Yeah.
the team. So,
Okay.
well, that's amazing. So, talk about computer science, because computer science, I did a very brief time in computer science there, but it was very early days. It was Fortran, very intense. Talk about how you survived it, because there's quite a few of us that actually tried computer science and then bounced out to something a little easier.
Yeah. Well, I had taken one computer class in college before I went to West Point.
Mm-hmm.
Fell in love with it. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. I love puzzles of any kind. So to me, it's just how do I solve this problem using computers? So the easy part was picking, computer science. I excelled in the math. I didn't have to take as many English classes. But the hard part was getting computer time because, we didn't have computers in our room. There were no laptops. It was just the big computers up in Washington Hall, I think it was sixth floor, and getting access to the computers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you showed up at the wrong time, they were all full.
No computer time.
So I got into the habit of basically going to bed after dinner, setting my alarm for about 11 p.m., signing out at the CQ desk, and nobody's on the computer at midnight. So I get on the computer.
Because I think we had a pass. You could actually be in the lab after TAP because they knew there was a shortage of terminals, basically, right?
And I took advantage of that a lot. So
see, that's clever.
Just to be able to get up there to not have to wait on a computer and be frustrated. I get better access.
Right.
And the poor gold coats who were there on duty at night having to give you your printouts, whenever you needed a printout. So, yeah.
I met the graduate who set up the computer department, and I cursed him out for all the pain and suffering. But it was a hot thing back then. The Apple II had just come out, and we were all fascinated with the technology. It seems quaint today, but it was a new branch of science.
Was it
so good for you for sticking with it.
5 or 8.25-inch floppy disks, and then we shrunk down to 5.5s, and then the little 3 whatever. So
we were one of the first classes that got away from the punch cards, and we were using those disks.
The disks, So
well, good for you. So now, what in terms of the course you study all the way through? What did you and what kind of technologies were you studying as a firstie, for example?
I don't remember all the computer classes that I had. I just remember, having to go all the time to the computer room in order to do homework, So everything else was just, all right, I've got to study that. I got to do this, but
Yeah.
Anyway.
And now the triathlon team took up a fair bit of time, but you have quite a few activities that you were involved in as an upperclassman. Talk about other kind of things you did.
It lists on my bio the hunting and fishing club, but I to this day cannot remember anything I ever did with the hunting and fishing club.
Right. You were from Magnolia. You had to put it on there just for dignity's sake.
Exactly. So everyone wasn't thinking I was, doing anything else. But I did do.
What's wrong with that boy?
I was on the CPRC, Cadet Public Relations Council, my whole 4 years. And the only reason for that was if you were on the CPRC, you could go home early for spring break and Christmas break because all you had to do was show up at a couple of local high schools. Yeah, West Point, rah, 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 sis, boom, bah, we're great.
So that's what the CPRC was. You went out and did speeches to the local
public
high school.
Relations, It was just all, anyone have any questions, and you meet with the local guidance counselor and any of the students.
So they let you go home a day early to go to the high school to give a speech.
And it was great. So, one less day at West Point was always a good thing.
When did you decide artillery was your branch?
I started looking at my class rank, and I was like,
assisted by a computer science degree, no doubt.
Bingo. And the analysis. I was just a little under halfway. I was in the middle of our class, but just a little under the midpoint.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I was solidly in that middle third there. And it all
Right.
came down to what assignments would be available to someone like me,
Yeah.
because I knew that if I had some combat arms experience, that if I could ever, transition out of that into computers, which was what I wanted to do, I would be okay. So I took artillery because they had more assignments, and we're we're going through your class rank, and you're watching the assignments get slashed off the board,
Right.
and at the time I had no clue that the slot to Italy was still going to be open when it got to my turn. So I'm watching it, and I was all gung ho to go, to Bragg or the 101st, anywhere. I just wanted to get some tube time, and Italy was still open, and it's like 5 people away, and it's still open. It's 4 people away, 3. So when it got to my point, I was like, well, I'm going to go to Italy, and I jumped at it, and I was like, I'm going to go home to the homeland. My grandfather was born in Italy, and we lost the E. It should have been Belmonte, but it was Belmont. Right. And I still have relatives that are Belmonte. But I got the slot.
Can you imagine the mileage you would have gotten out of being Belmonte from Magnolia? I mean, I can't even imagine what the minute column would have been like if you'd really put all that together.
Oh, yeah. It would have been great.
So you got to Italy, and then you shared in your notes you went to language school before you went.
Right. So after OVC, Steve Merkel was taking French. He took the French slot. Maura O'Brien, F2 Zoo, like me, she took the Dutch slot. Brian McGowan, I don't remember what cadet company he was in. He took the first Italy slot, and I got the second one. And I don't know how Mo did this, but she went out a week or 2 before Steve and I had left from Fort Sill, and she got a 3-bedroom house in downtown Carmel, California, and we all moved in together. And there were 6 of us, and it was it was like MTV, whatever that show was.
MTV West Point edition.
Yeah, because it was Mo and her sister, Susie, were in one room. Brian McGowan and his fiancée at the time were in another room. And Steve Merkel and I shared the 3rd bedroom. And the deck went all the way across the back of the house. You can see the ocean from the deck. And Clint Eastwood was our mayor because at the time he was the mayor of Carmel, California. So,
boy, that's epic. I think it's one of the unwritten part of our mutual histories is how we all would get houses together, and you had a whole nother lease of life in terms of like crazy experiences with friends. So that's fantastic. A 3-bedroom house in Carmel. Good for you.
That was a lot of fun.
And how did you take to Italian the language? Did you find that you picked it up pretty easily?
I didn't pick it up easily. I had French at West Point and some French in high school, but I could roll my R's, which played a big help. I could enunciate correctly. I had a good ear, and I could, at least speak it correctly without my Southern accent.
And so one of the details is all these slots were nuclear slots.
They were. Yeah. And Brian and I, McGowan, we were in different detachments. He was in the 12th. I was in the 11th or something. And he was at Aderzo. I was over here in Portuguaro. And we didn't see each other that often when we were in country, but we were, you're at a remote site, and it's just you and the Italian army around you. We have a little bitty compound, and we're all surrounded by the Italians. So it really did help, and you needed that language skill because, I had to help not just, working with the Italian army, but also my soldiers who lived on the economy. If they had a problem, you were the go-to guy to help your soldiers.
You had your own little command there, your own little base, really, in a way.
Yeah, and the duty at one of these remote sites was not glamorous in any way because you always had to have an officer on site at all times.
Right.
So if you were short a lieutenant, and we were always short a lieutenant, there was only 3 squads. There's 3 squad leaders. So one weekend you're on site,
Yep.
One weekend you're on call at home, so you really can't go anywhere, but at least
Right.
you can go home and go to sleep. And then one weekend you're off. So that's usually the weekend when you head up to Aviano Air Force Base. You buy your PX stuff. You go back and, you just every 3 weeks you're on a cycle when you're not out in the field. So
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And how long were you there?
I was there for 3 full years. Right after the World Cup in 1990, when the Italians won and they beat the Americans in the group stage, the U.S. team. I came back in September of 90 and transitioned from artillery into the Signal Corps.
Yeah. Talk about
And
that. What was
yeah,
that?
that was
Was that
I
you, or was
knew
it an opportunity?
that was that was all me because I
Right.
wanted to get back into the computer world.
Yeah.
And so I punched no one had to know that I didn't have any tube time. I punched my ticket, if
Yeah.
you will, for the, combat arms, transitioned to the Signal Corps because I wanted to get into the computer area and get the functional area 53. So went back. There was a transition course at Fort Sill, so I had to go back to Sill for about 8 weeks. The advanced course at Augusta, Georgia, Fort Gordon,
Yeah.
and then from Fort Gordon, I'd been accepted into the Functional Area 53 program, but they had a 9-month course of study at Wright Pat Air Force Base at the Air Force Institute of Technology.
Really?
So I
And
had
what
to
is it?
take
Function Area 53 is part of the Signal Corps, but it's
yeah,
computer.
but it's computers. It's just computers. So I had to take the graduate record exam while I was at Fort Gordon. So I kind of studied all the math and the logic because I'm going computers. I don't need to study the English stuff.
Right.
So I took the GRE. The colonel or somebody up at Wright Pat gives me a call. Captain Belmont. Yes, sir. I have a question for you. And he says, is English your first language? Well, yes, sir. I was born in Arkansas. I grew up speaking English.
What an alarming question to hear.
I had scored so bad on the GRE on the English section that I had to get a waiver to get into the program. I mean, I knocked it out of the park on the rest of it. But the guy said, Captain Belmont, we have officers here from other countries who scored better than you in the English portion of this exam. I was like,
Oh
well, that's
my
great
God.
because, my dad's a college English professor. So that sat really well at
That
home.
really brought it all home. Well, although I
yeah.
guess the C4 upper class would make you say cherry pie.
Pie.
Might have had a point.
Yeah. Well, I guess if I'd
Oh,
have
that's
studied,
funny.
had I studied the English portion, but whatever.
Oh well. How did it turn out when you got there? Was a lot of English in the course?
It was all computers. It was
all
great.
computers.
I got basically all
Right.
that course of study was halfway towards a master's degree.
Yeah.
So after I finished that course of study at Wright Pat, which was a beautiful place in Dayton, Ohio,
Yeah.
I had gotten a company command at Fort Detrick, Maryland. So now I'm going to, be a signal company commander. So I have been to a remote det in Italy. I've been to Monterey, California. I have not yet been to a large U.S. base, and now I'm going to Fort Detrick. And if no one's ever heard of it, it's not surprising because it's in Frederick, Maryland, and it's in the middle of a little bitty town.
You might be the king of the tiny little facilities.
I may have been the king of that, but my company command stretched U.S. wide.
Is that right?
I had my company
right?
command was Alpha Company, 11th Sigma Battalion. I had one Earth satellite, a satellite Earth station, the big, large 60-foot dish. I had one platoon for that. I had a tactical satellite platoon and a lieutenant squad leader there. And then I had the Mars radios. It's the military affiliate radio system, Mars, HF platoon. And that had 3 squads. It had a squad at Fort Detrick. It had a squad down at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and a squad out at Fort Lewis, Washington. So
Goodness
my
gracious.
company command expanded from Fort Lewis to Texas to Maryland,
And did you
and
have to
Fort
travel out there to visit those
I did.
soldiers?
I got to go out to see the soldiers out there,
Yeah.
and what they weren't run by. They had one senior NCO and a civilian contractor,
Mm.
but the Mars system was interesting because that's the fail-safe backup if anything was going to go down with landlines or anything else.
Yeah.
You could at least teletype, Morse code. All those guys they were trained in it, so they
Huh.
were. They had that backup, and they employed a lot of there were a lot of civilians who were part of the military affiliate radio system.
Mm-hmm.
So all those affiliate stations were, they had guys, ham operators and whatnot, who were, involved in that. Retired, I'm sure, Army guys who were just interested in the signal aspect of it.
You're
So,
another great example of how varied our experiences were as classmates because you get certainly the higher visibility. I was an infantry platoon leader and all the way up. But what a fascinating career. You always were on this path where you were in corners that many of us didn't see. So,
yeah,
and
it
then
was
you stayed in
interesting.
for 9 years, if you're notes.
Yeah, it was when we had gotten to Fort Detrick.
Yeah.
My daughter was born whenever I was stationed in Italy. My wife had come back at the time. She came back to Jersey, and my daughter was born. Then we go to the advanced course and en route. When I was still at Fort Sill, my son was born in Arkansas. My ex was living with my parents at the time because everyone was deployed to Saudi,
Yeah.
and the hospital staff was reduced, and so she couldn't have the baby there. So she decided to live with my parents for a couple months, and then at this time, my son was not developing normally.
Yeah.
So after a couple of tests and everything, we got him evaluated and found out that he was autistic.
Okay.
So we have the drawdown. Now we have the drawdown going on. My son's been diagnosed as autistic. Child number 3 has been born. So I have 2 sons and a daughter at this time, and we're like, okay, the writing's on the wall. I'm not competitive for promotion as an artilleryman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not competitive for promotion as a signal corps person. I've got my master's degree while I was a company commander. I finished off my master's at the local Hood College.
Yeah.
So I figured, okay, I need to start transitioning to get out. But I still had to wait another year or so before the class of '86 came up for the VSI SSB program. So
What program is that?
that was the drawdown, the buyout program, where they said, if you want to raise your hand to get out, we'll give you some money.
There you go. Okay.
So I'll wait another year and I'll take the money and run.
Yeah.
So while I was waiting, I got a job after my company command with the Defense Information Systems Agency. They had an office right there at Fort Detrick.
Okay.
So, the headquarters was down in D.C., but I stayed right there at Fort Detrick. And
Yeah.
we were living on base, and it was awesome because, the base is so tiny. There's one row of officer housing, and by the time you get in your car and you get to the office, the heater isn't even working yet. You're that close. So,
Right.
anyway.
So you transitioned out, but you basically stayed at Fort Detrick. Did I hear that
Yeah,
right?
I had basically 2 long-term assignments. I moved around a lot, all the little posts, but the 2 long-term assignments were Italy and Fort Detrick, Maryland.
Yeah.
So, Frederick.
So if I had a bell in this podcast, I'd ring it because it was the kid's bell. So you talked about your son, which was part of your decision, your daughter and your other son.
Yeah.
Where are the kids now? We got to talk about the kids. It's the only time I get in trouble if I don't talk about the kids.
We'll talk about the kids real quick.
Yeah.
I have 4 children and 4 children and 3 grandsons. So
for you.
The youngest son was born after we had got out, and we're living in Pennsylvania at the time.
Okay.
So Samantha's in New Jersey with her 2 young sons.
There you go.
My autistic son still lives with my ex-wife in New Jersey, so
Okay.
I see him as often as I can.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 have migrated back to my old stomping grounds, but they're a little further south. They're in San Antonio, Texas.
There you go. Beautiful
And I have a
place.
grandson down there. So, yeah.
Oh, good. Well, you got lots of opportunity to travel to see the family. the grandkids start to define the next set of activities, right?
And we're looking forward to doing a lot more travel as soon as I can retire. But my wife, being already retired, my current wife being already retired, she loves trip planning. So she plans all of our escapades. Right. And we've got some already planned for this year. So we'll be in London and Paris in May. And then we're doing a food and wine tour in Italy in the fall. We're going to Tuscany and Umbria.
We're going to talk about your wine interest because I tried to get together with you in New York. You were working at a wine shop, but we're going to get to that. Trust me, because I got to figure out. I got to hear all about that. But you talk about the Oracle and how you got into that line because it sounds like that was a big break for you.
It was. As a matter of fact, my first job out of the Army, was with this small little firm. I think it was called Telecom, something like that. And I was a network engineer. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't what I wanted to do, but I got some projects there where I was doing database development work on some internal company programs that they wanted written.
Right.
One day, one of the COO of the company, Chief Operating Officer, he says, "Kevin, I need you to stay after work. I need you to help me on this presentation." All right, no worries. So I'm staying after work, and I'm helping him put this presentation together, and I'm like, who is the client, or what are we pitching here?
Right.
He goes, "Oh, this isn't for a client." He goes, "I got a job interview, and if I get this job, you're coming with me," as if I had a choice. So, but I loved it because this guy, his son had just graduated from the Naval Academy. So, and me being an Army guy and an Academy grad, he just took me under his wing and said, "You're going to help me with this program or this presentation if I get this job." And he goes, "If I don't get this job, you need to get out of here."
Yeah.
He saw the writing on the wall. So while he did not get the position, I had to buy life insurance. I needed some life insurance policies and, take planning for my kids,
Yeah, sure.
In case of my unfortunate demise, which didn't happen, thank God.
Yeah.
Knock wood. And I was talking to the sales rep, and he goes, I got a guy. I need you to talk to this guy. His name is Hans Hermans. You need to talk to Hans. So I updated my resume, gave it to Hans. This other guy came to the meeting. There were two of us. We talked for about a couple hours.
Yeah.
He said, "I want you to meet these two other guys tomorrow." I said, "Okay." I met these two other guys. They were brothers, the McPeak brothers. And they offered me a job. And I said, "Great. How many people are in the company?" He said, "Well, you're number 5. So I had interviewed with everybody in the company. I had no idea this company was like,
you're 20% of the workforce.
These guys are working out of their basements, but they were Oracle financial consultants. And Hans told me, he goes, "You're smart, you're intelligent, you have the right background and the skill set. I will teach you what you need to know to be successful doing this development work." I made a career of it ever since.
That's great.
The best decision I made was going to join that company as employee number 5. So,
that's brilliant. He said, "You're smart even though English is a second language."
Even though you can't speak right. Dumb hick.
And so what does an Oracle financial advisor do?
Well, I was more on the technical side. So I did the computer program. So whenever you transition your software from a non-Oracle environment into an Oracle database environment, you have to bring in your data because you don't want to have to rekey everything. Right. But the table structures may be different. The data validations may be different. So you have to do all these computer programs.
And did you all focus on financial companies, or was it the finance departments of big companies?
Financial departments in larger companies.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
work critical databases because that's where your HR stuff is and all that stuff, and your P&L and all that.
So you work on transitioning data, and then they need specific reports that they want that aren't out of the box that you would get from any other software. You have to write custom reports for these guys. So I did all that stuff.
Work. Good for you.
Oh yeah,
good for you.
And I didn't necessarily want. And I got to a point where I was starting to move up that ladder into the management world, and I was like, you know what? I like managing me.
Yeah,
I like managing the team, the team of one. That's it. And I I've been able to make it a career just being an expert and being
I
able to do everything myself. Okay, I can use some help, but I've got my fine oiled machine programs running right now. I just
Yeah,
maintain them.
yeah. In the fullness of
So
time, I think it certainly when we were younger, it was lionized that you'd be in charge of a lot of people. I actually had a significant part of my career I had a satchel in plane tickets, and I would go around and do stuff, and that was a wonderful time because I really was able to accomplish quite a bit, and it was quite
yeah,
enjoyable. So I know
well,
of what you speak. Yeah,
and being a consultant, you're a road warrior, and
yeah,
so Monday to Thursday, you're down in Houston or up in Boston or in the
yeah,
middle
yeah.
of nowhere, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. So always on the road, always traveling. Yeah, but it was a lot of fun because you built up the points at the Marriott or the Hilton or the Delta Airlines or wherever it was.
All that good stuff. And you went through the
Yeah,
cycle of life where you thought the lounge at the airport mattered, and then in the end, you realized it doesn't
yeah,
matter. You go sit at an empty
no,
gate. What
that's it.
and so how did that take you up to currently? Or I know because we talked for a bit about you were doing it independently and kind of what are you doing now? How did your career
Well,
end up?
I right about right after I got I got separated,
Yeah.
divorced, and I wanted to get off the road again.
Yeah.
I was tired of being on the road so much. And an old contact of mine said, Kevin, I got a position here. It's 90 days, temp to hire at Cantor Fitzgerald in New York City.
Okay.
I said, perfect, I'll take it. And I wasn't there a month. And my boss at the time, she told the consulting company, we want to hire Kevin now. And he said, no, we need our money. It's 90 days. He has to work 90 days and then you can hire him. So, and that's about 12 years ago now, 13. And I've been there, ever since. So I've
Yeah.
been a counter employee.
Good for you. And
So
that's database work similar to what you were doing with the Oracle
same,
stuff.
yeah, the same stuff. But now it's, I do other, analytic work for, the tech side
Yeah,
of things.
right.
So,
Are you still a
yeah.
lone gun, or you got a little group of people you run around with?
No, I have people working for me occasionally.
Yeah.
I was projects come in and out, but for the most part, I'm solo. Thank God.
Yeah, right. No, you know,
Yeah,
it's all good. That is all good.
people problems. I don't mind helping people, but it's just I don't want to. I don't all the HR, all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't want to deal with that.
And you went through a bit
So
of a medical period there. If I looked at your note.
yeah, whenever I was transitioned out of the army, I had to have a physical,
Yeah.
and as part of my transitioning out of the army, oh, we need to give you you need to have a colonoscopy done.
Hmm.
So I had my first of many colonoscopies because
Right.
they noticed a polyp, and they said
Yeah.
we removed a polyp. So he said you should probably go every 3 to 5 years to get a checkup. All right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 3 years comes down the road, and I go to check up, and I have more. And then I
Mhm.
started developing symptoms, and I'm taking all the meds, and every
Yeah.
3 years became every 2 years, and every 2 years became every 1 year, and more
Yeah.
meds and different meds until it got to the point where, the doctor said, you really need to consider having your colon removed.
Yeah.
And that was a very difficult decision, but one now, in retrospect, I'm very happy I made. It
Hmm.
was a three-stage process.
Right.
To one, take out your colon. Two, replace what used to be your
Hmm.
colon with a portion of your small intestine. They call it a J pouch.
Yeah.
And then three, hooking up the third one, surgery was to hook up all the plumbing so you
Yeah.
don't have to wear your ostomy bag anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But being the overachiever that I am, instead of 3 operations, it turned into 6.
Well,
Uh, you know,
you always
uh,
did like to set the bar high, Kevin.
if there was a complication
You found
to
it.
have, I had it. I think they said a C. diff infection only affects your large intestine.
Yeah.
Well, I'm here to prove to you right now that a C. diff infection
You're a
is
walking
not
edge
for
case.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, it didn't help whenever after the final surgery, I had a blockage in my small intestine. where they had, I had a loop ileostomy done and that ruptured.
Oh,
Fortunately, I was in the hospital at the time when it ruptured, and they were
yeah,
able to
yeah,
do emergency surgery to repair me because, it's just like having your appendix rupture. You could get sepsis,
yeah,
very serious and
yeah,
very deadly.
yeah, yeah, very deadly.
So I was very fortunate. I
So
have
they
the
found a
scars to
polyp
prove it.
right when you got out of the military, and you've been kind of dealing with this for
It
quite a
was for,
yeah,
yeah,
most
it
of your
was
adult
many,
life.
many years. So public service announcement, boys and girls, go every 5 years or sooner if you need to get
That's
your
right.
colonoscopy. Drink the drink, poop the poop the night
Do it.
before. You'll be
Do it.
fine. Yeah. But it's a good way to make sure you don't end up. But when they did actually, biopsy my colon when they removed it, they did find cancer. So that
There
was,
you go.
knock wood, I got it out before it had spread
Yeah,
anywhere
because that
else. It was
one's not a
stage
good
one.
one if it gets too far. So good
No,
for you.
it
And then
was
when did all
stage
that come
one.
to a conclusion? When did you kind of get clear
Oh,
of that?
all of this happened during COVID. So
Oh,
my
okay.
first surgery was right before COVID hit in October, November timeframe before COVID.
Boy,
And
yeah.
then
Okay.
during the spring, every operation that I was supposed to have for the next phase of this process was delayed because there was always a spike in the
Yeah.
COVID numbers. And I would have to schedule when the numbers went down low enough and they had enough beds
Yeah.
available in the
Yeah.
hospital, then I could schedule the next surgery. So, it was
Boy,
an
you
elongated
sailed right into some
process.
choppy water there using a naval
Oh,
method.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, boy.
It was no fun.
So you through it now in terms of the different processes and procedures?
I
A little more
knock wood. I have not had any problems in several years,
good.
and it was again one of the best decisions. But I couldn't, you just can't go on living with those types of issues forever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was just unbearable. So
Well, we're glad you got through it.
yeah,
Tough sledding though.
on the right side of the dirt, I like to say,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Boy, oh
top
boy.
side.
So now you have an interest in wine and cheeses and all sorts of things. And so I was going to be up in New York. I reached out to you, said, "Hey, let's get
Yeah,
together." And you said, "I'm working in a
I
wine
got it.
shop," or had something to do with wine. I was like, "That's amazing." Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about your passion for this area and what's going on there.
So yeah, my again, my wife, current wife, she plans the vacations, and she's an awesome planner. And we have done a number of food and wine tours over the years, and I really developed a passion for wine, and so I started taking classes, and I have
Okay.
my level 3 sommelier degree, if you will, from the Wine and Spirits Education Trust that's based out
Nice.
of London. And so I know quite a bit about wine, and I started working at basically for a local guy,
Hmm.
pouring wines and doing tastings, and that led to a part-time job the last couple of years at a local wine store during the holidays.
Hmm.
Extra help they need. Can you help me
But
pick
highly
out a wine?
qualified help. It's not you're not moving
Yeah,
boxes. You're
I'm
there
not. I'm
offering
not just like,
opinions and
oh yeah, here's where it is on the shelf. Do you want to know something about this wine? Or this type of wine? What are you going to make a certain dish? What are you going to pair it with? Do you have any taste profiles?
yeah.
So I know enough about all the major wine regions of the world. I can make a qualified recommendation, and I can appreciate all these different types of wines and tell people where to buy them.
That's
So
amazing. And so for example, I think it's part of the Courage Never Quits program that if I'm out to dinner with Kevin Farrell and Chris Bump and Paul Kelly and people that we know, we could call you at dinner and say, "Hey, what's a good pairing for this dish?" Right? You offering that service?
Steve Carden, my ex-roommate, has taken advantage of that several times and said, "We're eating here," and he'll send me a picture of a wine list. You should pick that one. You should take that one.
You know, all podcasts are actually promoting something. I think we've hit upon what we're promoting for
Yeah.
you. It's the
So
the Belmont sommelier service only for class of '86. So if you're
that's
out
it.
there and
So
you're
yeah.
part of the great public, we appreciate it. But you're on your own. You use the restaurant sommelier. We got our own.
I'm hoping to turn this into my, when I do retire in a few years, I want to be able to have something to keep me busy from time to time. And I figured if I know enough about wine, I can get a part-time gig, just
Yeah,
helping out as at my
absolutely.
leisure, and of course, more food and wine tours around this world that I need to enjoy between
Well,
now
I
and then. So
don't tell anyone. but my
Yeah.
sister works out in the Napa Valley, and I grew up there. So if we need to get you out there to do a little scouting, we can get you set up out there.
I've been out there several times.
There you
Once recently with my wife. Once back whenever we were stationed at Monterey.
go.
So
Yeah, yeah. Well, don't. This is not part of the CNQ program. It's just for you. Just for you.
Okay.
But
All
if
right.
anyone else hears
Gotcha.
about it, don't tell anyone. Okay, good. Well, that's a great. That's a great. You can combine travel with your interests. You can always find a venue, if you will, where you can take that
Oh yeah.
expertise out. And
Oh yeah.
getting a sommelier 3 is not easy, so that's good for you.
Yeah. I liken it. There's several different programs you can go to get
Right.
your education. But I chose this one because it was a more academic program, and
Yeah.
there's one level one is if you've had a glass of wine, you can pass that class.
Right.
Level two is maybe your high school equivalence. If you get a high school degree. Level three would be a college degree. Level four would be a master's, and if you want to be a master of wine, that's like PhD level.
Right.
But I have no desire to be at that level.
Yeah.
I continue my studies just for my own personal pleasure now, and to
Absolutely. And I think that's
be able to help.
that's a really valuable perspective to have. Now,
Yeah.
you have done an amazing amount of work for westpoint.org,
West,
WP.org, which is kind of it's a complicated world, AOG, and talk a
yeah,
little about the work you've done there, because you're also an administrator on our Facebook group, and so your
yeah.
tendrils are everywhere. Talk about that.
Whenever I got out of the Army and I was stationed I was living in the Philadelphia area. I met up
Right.
with Steve Antok, our classmate,
Yeah.
and he had actually was the sysadmin for our year group for class of '86 for a while, and I was helping him out. He moved out to the West Coast, kind of dropped off the map, and I kind of kept doing it. But west-point.org was a service that was put in place because email was out there. The AOG wasn't doing enough to help grads in general in
On
that
that
realm.
technical side, they were
Right.
sending the assembly
And
out.
so, yeah. And so, the email lists, class lists that you can just bombard your email, and get everybody and send it one email to everyone. So they will give you a free email address if you want one. They host eulogy pages for classmates who died, and they do provide all these services to not just grads, but to parents clubs. So they were doing a lot, and it was all, 503c charities. So they make no profit. It's a nonprofit. And so I volunteered my time and tried to help keep the class connected in some small way.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of it was because the AOG wasn't doing it. But now the AOG is doing a lot more at hosting your podcast and all the other things.
Yeah, they're
and
trying to
now
pick
they
up
have
the pace a
eulogy
little bit.
pages. Yeah. So
Well, it was when you were involved. I remember obviously seeing your name on it, and I was in those early forums. It was a heady time because Facebook had just kind of come out, and forums
yeah.
were there, and there were all these different technologies. It was a dynamic time for where you went to do this stuff. So I think
Yeah.
what you did there was those forums were a very valuable precursor to what Facebook has become. And in my opinion, this is the first public service announcement, of course, is that we can all call you at any time to do our wine pairings. The second one is that I think Facebook and commercialized platforms are going to become less attractive for us to connect. And so we're going to need a place to hang out that we're not being bombarded with messages and algorithms and all that stuff. So, that I think is where it's headed, which is why I like yourself am putting some energy into making these platforms work for us. But so you worked on that. Are you still working with that?
It's still up and active, although a lot of people, we don't send out hardly any emails around because everyone's on Facebook. Everyone's getting, announcements through the AOG site now, but it's still there and working. They still take, donations every 6-8 months. They have a fundraiser, just enough to fund the next round of operations. And because I keep, an email address with them, I always donate and encourage people who do, give a couple bucks.
What I think is the conventional wisdom is that you can't have enough ways to connect. So it's not like
Yeah.
let's force everyone into. It's not like we're AT&T and you got to go this one way.
Right.
Look, if it's Facebook, that works for some people. It works. Sally Point works for some people. What you're working on works for some people. Just email. Some people just want to get phone
Yeah.
calls, whatever. So we just
Or
have
no
to have a
contact at
broad
all.
set of platforms, right? So
Yeah.
there isn't one platform to rule them all, basically.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
good. And then soccer coaching and things like that. You're still very active in that.
when my youngest son started playing sports, they needed an assistant coach. And I started volunteering my time to assistant coach my youngest son playing soccer. And, having lived in Italy for 3 years, there's not much else on TV besides soccer.
Right.
So I got interested in it. And
you may not have known much about the game, but you had all the enthusiasm.
right. And then
Right.
I would get so angry at the people who were refereeing the games because I was like, wait a minute, I'm just an assistant coach, and I read these rules, and it's like you don't seem to grasp the understanding of these rules as well as I do, and I'm not getting paid to do it. So, if he's the put up or shut up. So instead of being an assistant coach anymore, I went and got my level, at the time it was level 8 referee certificate.
Yeah.
And for 14 years on the weekends, spring and fall, I would referee soccer games for the travel leagues around, New York, New Jersey. And the best part was, instead of paying to join a gym, I got paid to run around and watch kids and blow whistles and yell at them. It was perfect. Who doesn't want to yell at kids?
I think the genius of that is actually cannot be overemphasized, right? So it kept you active. And I think that's just great. And you had a connection with the kids, and that's terrific. That's absolutely
my only claim to fame was I remember refereeing one young kid because I recognized his dad in the stands, and his father played for the U.S. national team, and Gio Reyna is the kid's name. He plays in Dortmund. I think he still plays at Dortmund now in the Bundesliga. And
there you go.
Whenever he was about 11 years old, I'm going down the list, checking the kids in before the game, and I'm like, Reyna. And I look, there's his dad. Yeah, I know. I recognize his dad. So my only claim to fame was I refereed one game. One game he played in. So
good for you. What have we not covered? I mean, I think we hit most of the high points, but what a tremendous life and interesting career.
I'll share with you the one story.
Sure.
About, you remember in 1982, the movie The Officer and a Gentleman came out.
I do. Yeah, that's right.
I don't think we saw that until like Christmas of that year.
Right.
And friends have always asked me, why did you stay at West Point, or what motivated you to continue there? And I don't know if you remember that scene where Lou Gossett Jr. has Richard Gere on his back doing all those exercises. Mayo, I want your DOR, Mayo, I want your DOR.
Yeah.
And he's on there. He's got snot running down his face. Yeah. I ain't got no place to go. That was me, my attitude about staying at West Point. I got no place to go. I'm not going back to Arkansas.
Yeah.
I have to make sure I finish this experience and get in the Army because, I'm not going back. So
yeah,
I only go.
I think there was I had a version of that myself. I had a wonderful family in California and all that, but there was nothing. There was no fallback plan for me, so it was going forward. So So looking back at it, just a terrific career, life, varied experiences. If you were to give yourself advice from any period in your life, if you were to go reach back in time and just whisper in your ear, where would it be and what would you say?
Yeah, I know you ask this about everyone.
I do.
And I wish I would, and I've heard it before from others, to stay closer in contact with people. But, I I wish I had done a better job when I was doing the stuff at west-point.org to keep the class more connected and involved. I did as much as I could, but I think I could have done a little bit better job. I could have done more. But just put everything else on hold, maintain a closer connection with our classmates. A lot of the work that you're doing with these podcasts, just do that little extra. And sometimes I was just lazy. I'm not going to forward this email but I could have done a little bit better job. Wish I had, but I am getting back in touch with a lot of classmates, going up this weekend, like I said, to the game with Jim Radecki and company, and I'll be at Mark Esper's
Good, I'll see you there.
Ceremony.
I'll see you there. I'm going to be there on May 20th,
Yep.
recognizing that this podcast is going to go into the archive and be forever. But Mark is going to be inducted as a distinguished graduate on May 20th, 2025, and I will see you there. So I plan on being.
Anyone coming on June 2nd every year for the last 2 years, this will be 3 years in a row, my wife and I volunteer at the Johnny Mac Golf Tournament at West Point.
There you go. You're a Johnny
I do not golf anymore, so my wife and I, we volunteer to help get people out on the course in a timely manner and get to connect with a lot of classmates that way and say hello, even if it's just briefly. Rob Douthit's always there. Pilar is always there.
Yeah. Stalwarts.
Mary Ellen is gone and from her role, but you just everyone that comes through, you see them, and it's great to just see a familiar face and say hello.
For sure. Well, I think just terrific that you're in that area and that we'll all have a chance to spend more time together. And it certainly is. The way I view it is I have the same feeling that you just articulated, and that, I wish I'd have gone back and when I was at Fort Stewart and gotten together with people, et cetera. But I just say, okay, well, looking forward, I'm going to maximize going forward. And then that's that. So it's always
I'm happy where I'm at in life right now. So I'm not going to change a thing, but you can always do better. You can always do more. You can
always get that one additional bottle of wine just right. That one pairing just right.
Be kind
Kevin
to yourself.
Belmont, what an absolute pleasure to reconnect and spend some time together. Just a terrific story. Thanks so much for coming on and talking to us.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe button. With over 900 living graduates, we have a lot of stories to tell, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.